what is the role of the leader in the fourth industrial revolution, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for having me here. I am very glad to participate in these kinds of conversation. I believe that conversation is always essential, and most of all in topics that are so now, so what we are living in this moment. So without further ado, let's get right into the question. So the role of the leader has changed. And why I'm talking about in fourth industrial revolution? The fourth industrial revolution is the digital revolution. So the role of leaders have to change to adapt to a volatile, uncertain, and complex world, what people call now the VUCA world. And that means that you have more complex decisions, many scenarios, and possible outcomes. So when you have many possibilities, many scenarios, you don't have a straight line to follow anymore, you get in this void of uncertainty. And uncertainty leads to anxiety. So people look up to the leader for assurances in times like this. And the leader's anxiety, it raises to the top because he believes that he has this role to be the commander, to have the control of things. So he wants to have all the answers. But in this complex world where you need this variety of points of view, knowing all the answers, it's impossible. So leaders become like vulnerable, and they are not used to this. The new role of the leader, it has to come from this vulnerability, from being comfortable of not having all the answers. It's letting go from this command and control mindset and moving forward to a more of an orchestrator role, or some surveys and some researchers are calling it also the coaching role, coaching leadership style. So I think that this role is more oriented to people actually getting into the basis of what leadership really is.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I find that it's exactly as you said, the fact that there is that vulnerability and it exposes that vulnerability, leaders, I feel have a fear that just by showing or demonstrating the vulnerability, it's going to change. So the pressure that they put themselves under is enormous, and it forces them to make decisions that are not necessarily best for themselves, but also for their organizations, because they, as you said, they're trying so hard to keep in charge. And it is very much this commander mindset, which, given everything that's we've seen over the last year and a half, our lives have changed as we know it, and would most certainly, in my opinion, I think will continue to change. And I think this was definitely something that sort of highlighted to everyone that change is inevitable. It's how ready you are going to be for it.
Yes, and at the same time is acknowledging other people's contribution. So once you have to get out of this role of giving all the answers, so where does these answers come from? They come from the team. That's why the orchestrator is used as an analogy here, because you have to acknowledge people having valuable opinions, like valuable skills, and that you have to take pride in getting the best out of them, instead of having all the results for yourself, like saying that you had it done, that they actually put in practice your ideas. You're the brain and they're the executors.
Definitely. And it's true. It's also, trusting your team to actually come up with solutions, because sometimes, as you said, you can't have the answers for everything. I don't know anybody who does. And putting yourself under, it's just unrealistic to believe that you will have the answers for everything. And leaders need to remember that the people that they have within their organizations, so it's important for them to, that in itself it will just enhance you creating a cohesive team where there is that accountability and that level of trust amongst your work members and, you know, amongst the employees, which right now I think is a very big issue as well. People are so uncertain about everything that no one really knows. Can I, you know, am I going to be trusted? Am I going to be judged? Because everybody's feeling vulnerable. And I think if I've had my experiences in the past where I've had, I can't even say they were leaders, they were really just bosses, where it was sort of, this is your job, get the job done, very little empathy, very little assistance in the smallest of things. You know, that sort of approach just doesn't work anymore. And I would certainly trust a leader who was vulnerable enough to say, guys, I don't have all the answers. Come, let's sit together. Let's find a solution together. It is also, it offers that inclusivity as well that I think most organizations need, and yeah, they require to function properly.
Yes, I totally agree. Once you adapt to these once you change your mindset about this, because I think that the most important challenge here, the biggest challenge, is this psychological challenge of accepting a new role, of giving up the previous status that some people thought that being a leader granted you. So once you have this more coaching orchestrator mindset, once you get into this role, you can start perceiving opportunities and seeing the advantages of having this diverse perspective of raising collective intelligence. And how do you actually do that in practice? Because I think that once I've heard someone talking one of the posts in LinkedIn, and this person was saying like, okay, I love these ideas, I think this is great, but how can you actually put that into practice? And right, because I think when you're talking about purpose, when you're talking about focusing on people, and you as a leader, as an orchestrator, you can do that by changing your meetings. If I could give one tip here about how to start creating this role is to adopt a co-creative meeting style, at least once a month with your team. I have this team coaching I am doing with I'm working on with a sales team, and the results have been amazing because they created a way of functioning and giving everyone's opinion. And there is this auto meeting with all the creative and the salespeople, with all the team from this advertisement agency, and they are for the first time knowing each other better. They are connecting to each other. And what does that actually have to do with remote practice, with digital world? Because you could do that and on site as well. All this orchestrator mindset, all of this, it could work in any kind of arrangement. But I think that you have the greatest opportunities to include people from different places, to exchange ideas. For instance, this group that I created together with this team, this creative meetings model, they are for the first time working together between Cape Green and Portugal. So they of course, they talked to each other, they exchanged information, they worked with each other, but they didn't know each other. They had never had the opportunity to work as a collective in a style that is favorable for raising collective intelligence. So I would say, change your meeting styles and start creating meetings, co-creative meetings for problem solutions.
I couldn't agree more, because it's also, it's, as you said, people's different experiences would offer different solutions and different insights into a possible problem. So to change that style and to be more inclusive and to have that that collective, it makes perfect sense. And I also think that people are also far more willing to share their ideas when they see other people do the same thing. There isn't that fear or shame that someone's going to think it's a silly opinion, or it's very much facilitating that communication and creating a very safe environment to do it, because
that's a must.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure you've had this experience where you might have a genius opinion, but because the environment doesn't feel safe enough, you rather keep your mouth shut, and it would be to the detriment of yourself and to your team.
No, and sometimes people still have to learn to communicate. So these meetings, when they have this structure that allows everyone to speak and contribute in a safe environment where you don't have this mistake, the errors don't have this weight. Things are just, say, opinions, not so you feel free to speak. When you have this kind of thing, you're working also on your communication. Each person, each member of the team is working on, how can I say this in a way that everyone understands? Or how can I say something that conflicts with the idea of my colleague just gave? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And people start also realizing how hard or not it is for them to communicate their ideas.
Definitely. And this is definitely something in all of these things eventually contribute to building your EQ, which I know is a hot topic, and I know we're going to get into that a little bit later in the chat. But it is about improving your self-awareness, being accepting of different views, and it has to start with communication and being accepting that you don't have all the answers. The answer you may have might not be best suited for this particular problem, but it's not to say it won't be considered further down the line. So it's just to also build on your resilience, I suppose, that your base for resilience is strong enough as well, that you're not going to take offense or you're not going to feel shamed, because I see that is a huge problem at the moment. People are so down and out, they almost don't have the emotional strength to deal with the criticism because their resilience is so low.
That's true. And once they repeatedly ask for someone's opinion, like if you have these coaching styles, you're always aware of how your team is feeling. You are always trying at least to understand that. So some people need to be more stimulated to speak. And they feel, and this is very encouraging. I've had feedbacks from team members that they felt like, I am so glad that you asked, because he felt like he was allowed to speak, because he was like, he wanted to speak, but he didn't know if people would be angry at his opinion. So once he has this stimulus, once people are really motivating him to speak, he developed his communication with more objectiveness and with less anxiety in his case.
Definitely, yeah. And that's also, we'll get into that, the anxiety, and obviously it's kind of what I'm very passionate about. It's obviously increasing, a person and an organization's productivity, through, well-being, and anxiety making a part of a person's well-being. But I could talk about that all day. I think let's maybe move on to the next part. So we do know that motivation and engagement is just core, a core part of a leader's job, really. How do they create that? How would you say a leader could increase that motivation and engagement within an organization?
I made a poll about these subjects that we included in this webinar, and over 50% of people wanted me to talk about this topic. How can you lead to increase motivation and engagement? So the answer, it's kind of, everybody's talking about it, but the truth is you have to lead by purpose. I have a little different perspective of what it means to lead by purpose, because I think that some people think that as an, I don't know, a mystical thing or something so subjective that you cannot really grasp. But I think that when you're connected to purpose, you're connected to asking what for. So you're connected to your strength, so to your intentions. You have a strong connection with the company values. So you understand the company values, you understand the company mission and the company vision, and you can translate that into your actions, into your communication, because you are always putting this intention in what you do. So lead by purpose, you can only lead by purpose if you agree to these companies' values, if you are in the proper environment. So that's the first thing. And the other is if you are really connected to your intentions. So that's when emotional intelligence comes back to the conversation. It keeps popping up. Yeah. But you can only do that when you're not just a reactive to the environment, when you are aware of your emotions and intentions.
Absolutely. And it is something that I've always believed in, and not just at work, but in life. You have to be intentional, because if not, what's the point really? You're never going to enjoy it. It's never going to be something that gives you joy. So being intentional, if you are doing that, you're already halfway there. And talking about values, speaking to clients, this is something that comes up quite often. It's a company's values and the person's values are not aligned. And I find that there's a disconnect there. So how do you think leaders can actually bridge that? Because it is a problem. So much so that with all the changes that have taken place, I sometimes feel that leaders themselves, it's conflicting values for them, because they've got expectations to manage. They're kind of being yanked on all sides. But what is the way, that we could bridge that gap, to have those values more aligned and to... Hi.
I'm back. We are back. I don't know if it was you, if it was me, but I lost you.
The question that I asked is how could we bridge that gap in terms of the misaligned values?
Well, that's a huge task. And why do I say that? Because usually the strategy that I can see the leaders are taking now, the leaders I coach and the leaders I interview, the people I know, is like investing in recruitment. So it's like getting people on board already aligned with these values, because the values are not negotiable. So sometimes it's not a problem if you don't have the same values. I don't think that's going to work for a long time. But sometimes the problem is not that, is that the people have a different understanding, and those values there are not clear for everyone. They don't have the same understanding of their concepts, of these values. And I can say that because when I'm working with teams and I raise these issues, and each one of them have to say what they understand about that in actionable behavior, in observable behavior, they have very different opinions, and we have to get to a common sense. So I think that the company's values must be multiplied and must have a ripple effect in all the team's values. So one of the most important things when you are talking about working with values and building these bridges is making the connection, is finding the connection, because people just don't understand that in a very concrete way. Sometimes it's too distant from what they believe that they can actually do on the daily routine. So I would say work with the team to build these values together. So you can have co-creative meetings for this purpose in order to assess what are the values that the teams are willing to follow, are connected to, and that will create this sense of belonging. Hi, Fernanda.
Hi, my sincerest apologies, everybody. I'm in Africa, and this...
Please, everyone, could you tell me if you could hear my answer? Okay, so that's because I didn't know if my connection, okay, so everyone heard the answer. That's great. Any questions about that now that we took a break? Do you have any questions regarding these topics that we just discussed that you would like to post? So Fernanda,
yes.
In short, I believe that companies must invest in recruiting the right people and having them aligned with the values from the start. But of course, we're not going to fire everyone. So the first of all is do some building work with these values and build the values of the team together and try to build these bridges by showing each one that having an agreement about the observable behaviors that are related to these values.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I do. I mean, I think you've said that quite beautifully, and I wouldn't want to add anything to it, but I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah. So in terms of being, of remote leadership, what are they? Yeah.
Okay, there are many challenges, okay? So I'm going to focus on remote leadership, all the ones that have to do with being distant from your team. So the first one is the mindset that you have to trust your employees to do their job. So trust, I think, is the biggest challenge that you have to overcome to be really focused on results, in value performance and delivery over tasks and hours spent working. That's a very industrial revolution mindset that you have to manage tasks, because once someone ended a task, the other one is going to start a new one. And this is the way things will be productive, things will work for the better. But now you have so many complex activities that doesn't even make any sense. So trusting your employees and adapting these expectations to the level of the employee's maturity. Because one of the misunderstandings I have been listening and reading about this is that trusting and focusing on results means delegating everything.
Yeah.
But you have to adapt to the level of delegation you can give according to the digital skills and time management maturity people have.
Absolutely.
Because it's not just about how can they do what they already do, is how can they do this in the digital world? How ready are they for this? So in this case, a senior manager could be immature and not ready to be delegated so much when he has to use, for example, a new tool, a new management tool that he wasn't used to working with.
So I've actually just received a very interesting question from Melina Simon, who she says that she's heard of a concept in companies that are more mature in organizational culture about building the culture with different values, because the idea here is to stretch, about hiring professionals with different values, because the idea is to stretch the culture and build a culture together. She'd like to hear the view on that. I feel I would agree with that sort of approach, because the more diversity you have within your organization, the more room there is for inclusion, which is paramount. So by employing people from different backgrounds with different skill sets, you are only strengthening your organization, because it's not one person will ever have the answer. And you need to remember that you are part of something bigger than just yourself. So I certainly, it's an approach that I would advocate. I don't know how you feel, Carol.
No, I feel the same, because I think that one of the values all companies must have now is diversity. So it must be built in their DNA, really, because otherwise none of this that I've been talking about makes any sense, because you have a volatile, complex, ambiguous world. You need diversity. Diversity is actually essential for this to work, to have different opinions, different points of view, especially if you are thinking about digital transformation, you are going into the digital market as a company. you are talking to a various numbers of people and different kinds from everywhere. So diversity is an essential, very essential cornerstone for all of this work.
And do you think, I don't know what your feelings are, but do you think leaders are becoming better because of, you know, the changes and the transformation that took place during COVID, or do you think they're a bit stuck? You know, what are your views on that?
Well, I'm going to talk about because there is literature, there are articles that you can read, and there's the people I've been working with. Of course, people that look for me are people that are willing to make a change. So that this is a premise that we have to take. So, but people that look for me, they want to make this change. They don't know how. They are trapped in this mindset of command and control. They cannot see the answers. They find it hard to operate in a new way. Or they needed this to be done even more faster, because we don't have time for a long learning curve. So, but I also talk to a lot of people. I also know a lot of people. I guess there are two kinds of leaders there. The ones that are expecting everything to go back to normal so they get control again. And I think that these people are missing out on many opportunities. And there are the ones that really, really, really want to follow this, to surf the tsunami that's going to hit us.
They need to lead from the front, and they need to walk the walk and talk the talk, and really, as you said, be intentional about it, and actually set the example. You know, leaders are people that you look to, you know, and they have to be, I feel that a good leader will not ever expect anybody to do anything that they themselves wouldn't do. So again, we need to consider the values. So differences between bosses and leaders. But I think, as you said, if the intention is there to change, you will change. You know, it's what
you look for the help you need.
You'll look for the help 100%. I mean, it's also to create the change and to ensure that it's sustainable and that the change stays and sticks. I mean, with what we do at Bessern is we measure and enhance, you know, a person or an organization's performance and well-being. You know, it's through technology and behavioral sciences. So the core here is to actually understand how a person thinks. So, you know, to expect somebody to do something once and not to ever repeat it again and to actually change their habits is just not sustainable. So the intention has got to be to change and to want to change and to want to always have an open mindset and forever learn, because if not, you will very quickly diminish your capacity, your team's capacity, and, you know, probably not do very well.
Yes, probably.
Yeah.
Probably won't do very well.
Yeah. So in terms of right now, so obviously there are so many
challenges, right? We were talking about the challenges, and then we mentioned trust and went to the answer. So because I think that because trust we have been mentioning before about this purpose-driven leadership, but I think the practical challenge is hybrid teams. I think that hybrid teams is a huge challenge. I think it's even bigger challenge than a 100% remote team, because you have so many kind of arrangements, and people are now in different kinds. They have different personalities. They weren't raised to have all this time management in their hands. They are used ever since they are children to have people managing their own time. So when you get to these companies like another family that tells you what time do you have to do something, so people will also have to learn how to do this. So hybrid teams, and they can be a huge problem to create this sense of belonging. Because if you don't think remote practices first, if you don't think that if one person is remote, you have to put the party will have to be remote. You cannot have the birthday party of the month with some people at the office and one or two or three people watching them.
Yeah, exactly.
I've seen this happen. And the people that were left behind, that they were at home or they were in a client, they didn't feel they belonged. So they were thinking about leaving the company. They didn't have this.
Yeah, exactly. So it was actually a comment from one of our attendees, Billy Allen, where we were obviously talking about belonging, where he says he loves the idea of looking at what values are already present and what values you can build together to create that sense of belonging. So yeah, I like that idea too, Billy.
Sure. I think that everything that we do now, in this is included in this orchestrator or coach style leader, is building together, using these opportunities to build together. The more you do that, the more commitment and engagement you will have from the people who built that. It's part of them. They contributed to that. So they're going to owe to that.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And it's also, as you said, it's being able to become agile, flexibility. You have to. I mean, I speak for myself. I have my not that I don't like change, but we do. We become accustomed to our way of things, and it is difficult to all of a sudden switch off that and switch something else on. But that too takes time. But it's to become agile and to be more flexible in your thought, to also understand that it's not going to, this is not a marathon. I mean, and this isn't a race, it's a marathon. This is a long, people's expectations, I feel, is that it's going to happen immediately. Nothing happens immediately.
And I think that you have to be fast enough to change. And I think that when we are coming together with this agility is a mix like with flexibility and proactiveness. Like you are flexible enough to see that there's something that's coming, that might be an obstacle or an opportunity, but you have your perception 100% on. You have your radar on, and you're always checking, but not just for problems, but for possibilities. The thing that now people are so shaken by all this, they are so lacking resilience, that they can see that this uncertainty brings opportunities. It's uncertain of the benefits as well, not only of the obstacles that you might find.
Definitely. And I mean, and just hitting on resilience again, I think right now it is something that has to kind of, resilience building for teams, for organizations, has to be strategy, because people are emotionally, physically spent. They are running on empty. Completely.
That's what I told a client of mine the other day, was talking about evaluation, performance evaluation, but it's not the time.
No,
it's not the time to do this.
It's exactly that, for performance reviews and that. I think people have just been so stuck in this mode of let's survive, let's keep this together, let's not kill our wives and husbands at home, let me not lose my job, let me still try. People don't, I think just to get through a day was difficult enough, let alone going through some sort of performance review, because people don't feel good at the moment about themselves.
Sure.
So what is there to review other than the person's not feeling very good? And that it's been a tough year. So, resilience, without a doubt, and I speak from my own experience, it's incredible how small little changes and changing the smallest of things and creating a habit that is something that you can do, you can action on a daily basis, does eventually afford you that little bit of room in your mind where, instead of something taking 10 minutes, it's actually only taken me 5 minutes, and you feel, okay, and then you do small little increments like that, and you do build that space in your head where you feel you are open to a few more challenges because your resilience level is higher.
Sure. That's a must. Also another must, because resilience now will depend a lot on the leader, because the leader has really the power to make your life hell.
Absolutely, definitely.
Most people quit their leaders. They don't quit the companies. They quit the leaders. So
it's exactly that.
So it will depend on your leader, on your boss. If you have a leader, or if you have a boss.
I mean, and I don't know if there's any one of our attendees who is a leader, who is sitting in a situation right now that they do recognize that they need to make the change. You know, how are you feeling? You know, are you able to be honest with your team and say, guys, you know what, I don't have all the answers. We need to sort of sit down and try and find solutions to these problems together. What is the reality of your life as a leader, if there is anyone? I mean, obviously, if I see someone reply, I'll let you know. Billy, so he says, people should not need a performance review to find out how they're doing. They should always know how they're doing. Yeah, exactly. That's it. It's also to be connected. You know,
no, if
a
the
performance
expectations
review
are
after,
clear.
Exactly. So yeah, good statement there. Agreed. Anyway, so let's move on. So the most important skills for leaders right now, okay,
Let me
as we
just,
know,
before we get into these skills, I mentioned that we talked about some of the challenges, but we didn't say any opportunities. And that's what I think, that we could put some opportunities here, because I think that's the kind of, you put the obstacle there and then
yes, absolutely.
So I think that the opportunities are for those who really want to embrace these uncertainty times and want to heavily have some level of remote practice as a strategy, because I think that some people are taking this as only a benefit, flexible hours and having remote work as a benefit. And I think that people are missing the opportunity to have this as strategy and have some gains, such as have people working at the peak of their productivity. I think that you have to take this into consideration. Finding talents in 100%. Different parts of the world. What? Can you hear me?
100%.
Sorry. Okay.
I can hear you.
I'll go on. Okay, so because you said something, well, going back. So I think that the people who really embrace remote practice in any level as a strategy will have people working at the peak of their productivities. They will find talents in different parts of the world. You can exchange ideas between teams. As I mentioned, this example that I gave from these teams from Cape Green and Portugal, they are connecting really in a different level. And reimagine work. This is a great opportunity to rethink the businesses, the processes, and adapt to your needs and your realities now, regardless of just remote. It's a good opportunity to build a new culture, because if you want to find a way of working remotely, we have to go through this purpose review. And you will find time for strategic work. Because once you teach your team to be focused on results, they will come up with solutions and not only problems. Will not be just the leader, because once the leader is a coach leader, so he starts engaging these people in these kinds of thoughts, of thinking of solutions whenever they have problems. So I think that this poses many opportunities for people that actually think of reimagining the way they work and taking the advantages of the virtual environment, not only the downsides. So I think that for hybrid teams, whenever we are talking about hybrid teams, which are the biggest problem, I think the biggest challenge, it's thinking that there is not only one solution. So people keep asking me for the best model. I don't think that this exists. I think that you have to build the solution inside your company, calling on external observers or contributors like consultants or external coaches to test, to make a pilot, test, assess, and see if that works for your company, and having this intention, knowing what you want to achieve, the results that you want to take by adopting this practice.
Yeah. So I heard everything, and yeah, like I said, I heard everything and I think it was beautifully answered. So yeah, if we can just then move on to the last little bit of our conversation before we open up the Q&A to our attendees. So in terms of skills for leaders right now, obviously EQ and empathy, is a very big part of it. What do you think the skills needed right now are?
Okay, apart from emotional intelligence and empathy, okay, so these are the most important ones, okay, because you're going to put together everything there. That's the essential skill. But you have the technical proficiency. So a recent research from MIT are demanding digital savviness from their employees, but they're not digital savvy. So how can you want your employees to engage in virtual communication if you never tried a collaboration tool before? So you have to try new tools, and you can do it for yourself. Like, what tool could make my work easier? Mm-hmm. The team, and you can again build this together with the team, get everybody to collaborate and learn together new technology. But you have to be curious about that. So I think technology proficiency is an essential lifelong learning mindset, because things are changing too fast. And if you don't keep up, your ancient history.
So to remain current, absolutely. In terms of being tech proficient, there was a review done by Deloitte where a lot of leaders are also feeling a complete choice overload. There's so much out there, they don't know what to choose. And also they're lacking the vision of where they want to see the organization move to, because at the moment there's just so much content out there. It is overwhelming. So yes. My solution or my suggestion to anybody who may be in that position is start small. Like I said earlier, this is not a race, this is a marathon. The changes will need to start off small in order for them to be long lasting, and for you to really start enjoying the change, as well as reaping the rewards and the benefits of the change. So if you are feeling that there's far too much choice out there, look within yourself as a leader and say, right, what is it that's actually affecting you right now? And put it forward to your team and say, I'm feeling this. Are you guys perhaps feeling the same? And I think you'd be surprised how many similarities in terms of that overload you and your team members are feeling.
Yes, sure. And in case of, because if you have the intention, as we mentioned before, if you know the purpose and that's your goal, and these things will be tools, and it won't make that much of a difference which one you're going to choose. And as long as you pick one and use it and test it, make it that all of them have a free online, like 1 month or 7 days, or you buy it for 2-3 months, test it, but do it.
Yeah, but that's also the thing. So what we always advocate, at Bessern, and why I love Bessern, is that the changes need to be small enough, okay, that it's attractive enough for the change to take place. So you can't kind of do this overload of, this is going to guarantee complete success. It's, hours and hours and hours long, and then you're finished. Because we don't live like that. No, we don't eat one meal in our lives to see us through for the rest of our lives. It has to happen in small doses. So I think once you know how you are feeling about a particular problem or a situation that may need improvement, starting small is a great start. No, if anybody has, I would be shocked if your team would judge you as a leader if you were honest and vulnerable enough to say, this is how I'm feeling. How are you feeling? Let's start tackling the small things so that we don't feel this mental and emotional overload, because that is sadly the reality of the world right now. People are burnt out. They don't have mental space. They don't have that emotional wealth anymore. So start building it up slowly and do it together. Your strength is doing things together.
That's true. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Another skill I think it's very important now is to be data oriented, which I think that is also a gap. a skill gap now, and it's essential for remote working. If you're not going to micromanage, you have to focus on results, so you have to focus on information and getting this information in a very precise and usable way. So I think that that's a really gap.
But as we were also saying earlier, I think if another skill to have is to know your team. So if you have team members that have their peaks and troughs, I, for example, I'm the kind of person that I am my most, really, when it comes to high concentration, it's really between 5 in the morning and about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Whereas other people are the complete opposite. And I think as a leader, it's good for you to be that connected to your team that you can actually see that, instead of allocating a normal workday when you know that productivity levels are at a particular team member's highest earlier, or, you know, at the different times of day. So knowing peaks and troughs, very, very important as well. And skill crafting, you know, if you know Fernanda is not good, at time management, don't give me things that require things that are time managed, because it's just not going to end well, and it's just going to put that person under pressure.
Sure, I think that all the old school theories, Hersen and Blanchard, Queen, they still work. You just have to use them, like these management tools and team tools to get to know your to assess your team and manage and delegate and motivate. You have those. I think that the thing that people will have to pay more attention to the leadership demand, actually pay attention that work now is to make these people deliver the same, because I think that some leaders still have the mindset that they are the seniors there, so they are more focused on the technical part of the job that they have to deliver than on the team management.
Yeah,
I think that people need to focus on team's needs.
Yeah. Am I muted? No, I'm not. Well, I can't believe we're nearly finishing our hour. This has been an amazing chat, and like we said, there's so many things here that we're both so passionate about. We could honestly speak for hours, but I'd like to take this opportunity to ask the attendees if they have any questions. Let's take these last 10 minutes to answer any questions you may have. Go, feel free. What I am going to do as well is I'm going to put both Carol and my details in the chat, our email addresses, and also if you'd like to reach us, you can also find us on LinkedIn. I'll put that in the chat box for you now. Is there anything? We can keep talking, obviously, while people, are hopefully thinking of some nice questions for us.
Yes, I think that we received some questions from Lucia. You can check that.
Okay.
Then I sent you. Let me check here.
You go ahead. Yeah, I'm just going to put this
here. She asked a little bit about how could you relate it to process, Lucia? Because I have to choose one of these questions because there were so many. Some of them I think I've already answered. I think how to manage the communication flows. I think that that's important, and that's a very practical tip for remote working. You have to privilege asynchronous time. So whenever you're planning the management and the activities and the meetings especially, you have to think, is this important enough to break the focus time of my team? Because you have to teach the team to communicate asynchronously in a more effective way. So, of course, I think that will be a group learning, because people are not used to that, to working asynchronously and leaving these opportunities for synchronous time to be about co-creation, not about information, for example. So you have to work a new workflow, thinking remote practices first, and thinking that you want to leave more asynchronous time, more focused time for everyone to do their jobs and not without so many interruptions.
Yeah, that is true, because I also find, these morning meetings, is it really necessary to have a meeting every morning that lasts half an hour for you to really not talk about anything constructive that's actually going to be the motivator for change? I speak from my own experiences. I mean, when I was, my background is in public health, and I worked for a number of NGOs, and obviously we would have to have these meetings, but for the most part, nobody was really talking about anything. It was just lists, like, in these meetings. So
Yes,
the
yes,
idea,
yes. The intention again. What's your
mm,
intention with this meeting? You have to have an intention. You have to have a clear outcome you expect. You have to ask yourself, at the end of the meeting, what will I have? What do I want to happen? It's a
exactly,
conclusion. It's a solution. It's an
yeah.
idea, ideas. What do you want to get from that?
But
And
also
is
to
it worth
remember,
it
yeah.
interrupting people?
But it's also important to also appreciate the process. So understandably, we are driven to solutions. We are goal orientated. That is what drives us forward. But it is also important to understand and respect the process, because sometimes to reach those solutions and goals may not be that easy. So the process is actually where you're going to be learning and growing the most, and where you are going to be building on your resilience skills, where you are going to be improving on your communication, where you're actually building these real true connections with yourself and your teammates. So yes, absolutely, that there has to be a conclusion. Like Lucy actually said, focus. There has to also be focus. If there's no focus, what's the point? But enjoying and respecting the process is just as important, as the goal.
Yes, sure, because this process has to have meaning. Again, we come back to purpose and meaning and intention, because it was built to be effective and lead to a result. So you have to enjoy this, of course, because otherwise work is hell. But and once you build that with the team and you find better ways and people are heard in a ways that they can improve the process, you're going to have everyone on the same boat rowing to the same direction.
Exactly. So Rita has also said, what could also really work is if you could point out what the point of a specific meeting is by email.
Sure.
Just email the person. It's like she says, absolutely, Rita, meetings are important, but like with a purpose. If you're going to be sitting there and it's not something that even involves you, why are you there? You could actually be doing something productive. So very good point.
There's a company I interviewed that had a very interesting approach to this. They took this asynchronous work to the top. And
Yeah.
they usually do, like, you're doing an asynchronous job, you finished your part, and now you have to someone else has to pick up from where you left. And they record a video message explaining to the person what they did, where they stopped. It's like usually a 1-2 minute video. And she told me that he's been working beautifully. This is a text jar. She's Darcy Bowles, is the director of culture, and the company is 100% remote. And they structure these processes that really guarantee that this would work.
So I've got a very good question from Billy. I'm loving your questions, Billy. He says he thinks that some leaders with less EQ and more legacy thinking have a fear or a resistance to change because they can't see their place in it. What ideas do we have for creating psychological safety for them? So that could actually work. Okay. Okay. And yeah, so I think what you see now is it's a lot of the generations right now working in organizations are completely different. So that expectation is different. So if you are sitting with a leader who is more legacy based, you probably find that he is of an older generation, okay, and is afraid to let go of that structure because everything now, it's so quick, so instant, so free. Information is so free and accessible that sometimes it is scary for you as an older generation to let go of that legacy mindset and think, oh gosh, if I don't hold on to this rope for my life, I'm going to actually lose control and possibly become inconsequential in this entire system. So I think for people like that, I don't know, and please, I'd love to hear your thoughts, Carol. For people like that, I would certainly recommend some one-on-one sessions with that person in order to assist them to break through that barrier, because this is all it is. It's a barrier. And to afford them the understanding that it's safe. That person, if you are that mindset, you are valued. In actual fact, your values you can teach to the younger generation. You can learn from each other. So one-on-one sessions for sure, I would say would be the first step for somebody.
I totally agree. And I think you would have to work on this person's identity, because usually legacy mindset, baby boomers think a lot like
yes.
this. They have this identity between their value and their status, their job, and that's connected to being the boss, to telling the orders, telling people what to do. So if I'm not this, who I am. So in some cases becomes an identity problem.
Sorry, Billy's a she, not a he. I'm so sorry. Sorry, really. Well, now we've cleared that up, I won't make the mistake again. I just wanted to mention that we will be sending the link to the session, so you can follow us on YouTube as well. And Rita also says, she just mentioned that she thinks that people with that legacy mindset are afraid to lose power, but in actual fact, it's the opposite. So yeah. Oh, thanks, Billy.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Well, this has been amazing. It's 8 o'clock here, 7 o'clock there. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. As I said to all the attendees, I have put our contacts in the chat. So please follow us, get in touch with us. We'd love to speak to you directly. And any further questions, just feel free to get in touch with us both. And Carol, thank you. This has been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to many more.
The pleasure was all mine. Nice to be here. And thank you again for the invitation. Thank you for everyone to participate and send your questions. And we'll be in touch on LinkedIn, probably.
Definitely. Have a good evening. Boa noite.
Bye-bye. Boa noite.
Bye.